You do not become a genius overnight. You become a genius through the smallest, most ordinary habits you barely notice repeating every single day. People often marvel at the brilliance of great minds, their discoveries, their art, their seemingly otherworldly ideas, but they rarely pause to ask, what fueled that brilliance beneath the surface? The truth is not a sudden flash of divine inspiration. The truth is a long, steady rhythm of repeated actions that carve deep grooves into character, thought, and destiny. Think of your life as a canvas. Every stroke you add, no matter how small, shapes the eventual masterpiece. When you pick up your phone instead of a book, that is a brushstroke. When you jot down a fleeting idea instead of ignoring it, another brushstroke. When you walk an extra 10 minutes or choose to listen instead of interrupt, more strokes. A genius is not someone born with a flawless canvas, but someone who keeps layering the right strokes day after day until the image becomes undeniable. Repetition is the mother of mastery, a saying goes, and it is perhaps the most accurate description of human growth. Habits are not flashy. They are not glamorous. They are the quiet pulse beneath your daily life, but their power lies in accumulation. Imagine a single drop of water falling on stone. The first drop leaves no trace, but 1,000, 1,000,000, 10 million drops. Over time, the stone is reshaped. So too are we reshaped by the repeated patterns we choose. History often blinds us with the highlight reels. We read about Newton formulating gravity under an apple tree, or Beethoven composing while deaf, or Marie Curie uncovering radioactivity in her lab. But what history leaves out is the texture of their days, their endless practice, their meticulous notes, their hours of quiet labor. Genius does not happen in grand events. It is hidden in the microscopic details. Let me ask you, if one tiny habit, repeated faithfully, could alter the entire trajectory of your life, what would you choose? Would you write one line every morning? Would you pause 5 minutes each evening to reflect? Would you drink more water? Or stretch your body? Or whisper gratitude before sleep? These small actions may feel trivial, but every mountain begins with grains of earth, and every symphony begins with a single note. You are the sum of what you repeat. Your mind is a field, and habits are seeds. Plant weeds, and weeds will flourish. Plant roses, and beauty will bloom. The astonishing part is that you already have a daily rhythm. You already brush your teeth, check your phone, eat meals, and speak to people. But hidden inside that rhythm are choices. Choices to add one small, intentional act that, if nurtured, grows roots so deep it cannot be easily removed. Consider this image: a mason building a cathedral. To the passerby, laying a single brick seems insignificant. It is dull, repetitive, ordinary. Yet one day, decades later, the cathedral stands as a marvel. No single brick created it, yet each was indispensable. That is the reality of small habits. You may not see their impact in a week or a month, but over years they build structures of greatness, so sturdy they outlast lifetimes. This audiobook will be your guide through that hidden cathedral of habits. Together, we will look closely at the micro-habits that shaped history's geniuses. We will see why the tiniest behaviors often matter more than grand resolutions. We will uncover how a single, humble action can spark a cascade of transformation in creativity, health, learning, and relationships. But before we wander deeper, pause for a moment and reflect. Right now, wherever you are listening, notice your surroundings. Perhaps you are on a train, in your room, on a walk, or lying in bed. Perhaps it is morning, or the quiet hours of night. I invite you to take a second. Comment below where you are listening from. and what time it is in your world. Let us create a living map of voices connected by curiosity across continents and time zones. And while you are here, do not forget to subscribe to this channel, AudioBook Sanctuary, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next journey into the stories that shape our lives. Now, let us return. Picture Leonardo da Vinci as a young apprentice, sketching endlessly in his notebook, or Mozart at the piano repeating scales until his fingers ached, or Darwin walking the same garden paths day after day, turning over ideas in silence. Each of them, in their own way, laid bricks. They did not wait for genius to strike. They built it slowly, patiently, with ordinary acts. You and I are not so different. What you repeat in silence is what the world will one day notice. What feels invisible today may one day shine so brightly that others will call it genius. But you will know the truth. It was not magic. It was not sudden. It was the steady rhythm of repetition, shaping you one small act at a time. As we close this opening step of our journey, carry this thought with you. Greatness is not an event, but a pattern made of repetitions, of habits, of drops of water carving stone. And if you are ready to see what seeds of genius are waiting inside your own daily life, let us step forward. Because the seeds of micro-habits are about to show you how greatness always begins, smaller than anyone expects. Seeds are the beginning of everything. You would never look at an acorn and imagine the towering oak that one day shelters generations, yet the potential is already there. In the same way, the tiniest actions you repeat hold inside them the blueprint of what you may become. Micro-habits, as they are often called, are those nearly invisible choices, so small they slip beneath your awareness. A sentence scribbled in the corner of a notebook, a moment of silence before reacting, a glass of water before coffee, one push-up before bed. They do not look like much. They do not even feel like effort. And yet over time, these are the seeds that grow into the forest of your life. The human brain loves consistency more than it loves intensity. This is why grand resolutions collapse under their own weight while small habits slip under the radar and stay. Think of a door hinge. It is tiny, easily overlooked, but without it, the door cannot open. Micro-habits are the hinges of transformation. They are small enough to repeat without resistance, and repetition is where the magic lives. Take, for instance, the simple habit of writing down a single idea each day. On its own, it seems insignificant. One sentence, but in a year, that becomes 365 ideas. In a decade, more than 3,600. Most people say they do not have time to create, but the truth is, creation happens in increments. No painter begins with a gallery. They begin with a single brushstroke. No musician begins with a symphony. They begin with a scale. These micro-habits are the grains of sand that together become a beach. What makes micro-habits so powerful is their stealth. They bypass the alarm system of your willpower. When you promise yourself a huge change, I will run 10 miles every morning, or I will write a book this year, your brain sounds the alarm, demanding massive energy. Resistance rises. But when you whisper, I will walk 5 minutes after dinner, or I will write one sentence today, resistance shrugs and steps aside. The small habit slips in, roots itself, and once it is there, it begins to grow. Here is the paradox. Small habits feel harmless, precisely because they are small. But that harmlessness is their strength. A single push-up is laughable. It will not change your body. But make it a ritual, and the ritual becomes a chain. Soon one push-up becomes 2, then 10, then a lifestyle. The brain attaches identity to what you repeat. Each time you act, you vote for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. The seed becomes a sprout, the sprout a sapling, and one day you wake to find an oak tree where once there was only an acorn. This principle is not new. Ancient wisdom spoke of it in Proverbs, "As you sow, so shall you reap." Every day you are sowing. Even the choice to do nothing is a seed. If you plant distraction, distraction grows. If you plant focus, focus grows. There is no neutral ground. The soil of your life does not stay empty. It always grows what you place in it. The only question is whether you are planting weeds or roses. Imagine a sculptor working with marble. Each strike of the chisel is minor, barely removing dust. But repeated thousands of times, the statue emerges. The genius was not in the final strike, but in the countless small ones. Micro-habits are your chisel. They chip away at inertia, at chaos, at mediocrity. Slowly, the form of your best self emerges from the stone. Consider how this plays out in ordinary lives. A person who takes a few minutes each morning to plan their day often lives with more clarity than someone chasing endless to-do lists. A student who reviews notes for 5 minutes each evening outpaces the one who crams for hours before an exam. A parent who whispers encouragement to their child daily creates confidence, far deeper than the one who delivers rare, dramatic speeches. Tiny drops, invisible rivers. Now pause for a moment. What is the smallest action you could introduce into your own life that requires almost no effort, but could, in time, shift everything? Not a grand transformation, just a seed. Perhaps it is journaling one sentence before bed. Perhaps it is greeting the morning sun with a single deep breath. Perhaps it is placing your phone in another room during dinner. These are not revolutions, but revolutions are born from such quiet beginnings. The seeds of micro-habits hold one final secret. They create momentum. Once planted, they nudge you toward more. Water a plant, and soon you want a garden. Write one line, and soon you crave a page. It is the humble start that matters, because the start makes all else possible. So let us step forward. We have seen that genius is not one dramatic leap, but the sum of many small steps. Now we turn to history, to peer behind the curtains of celebrated figures and uncover the humble routines that sustained their brilliance. Because behind every extraordinary life, you will always find ordinary habits, repeated until they no longer seem ordinary at all. History remembers the fireworks, but it rarely remembers the match that lit them. When we speak of genius, we speak of breakthroughs, discoveries, symphonies, or inventions that seem to fall from the sky. But if you look closer, behind every moment of brilliance is a long trail of quiet, ordinary habits. It is in the daily rituals, simple, almost boring repetitions, that the soil of genius is cultivated. To understand this is to pierce the myth of sudden greatness and see the patient craftsmanship behind it. Think of Thomas Edison. We remember the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera. What we often forget is the notebook after notebook filled with sketches, formulas, and half-formed ideas. Edison is said to have produced more than 1,000 patents, but what people miss is the method. He wrote, tested, failed, and wrote again every day. His genius was not lightning. It was a steady current fueled by the habit of relentless documentation and experimentation. Or take Albert Einstein. We recall the image of him as a wild-haired genius with theories that bent time and space. But Einstein's breakthrough papers were not miracles. They were the result of years of reflection during quiet walks, of conversations repeated with colleagues, of a daily rhythm of thought experiments. His habit of carrying problems with him, turning them over like stones in a pocket, was a practice so ordinary it did not look like genius until the answers appeared. Leonardo da Vinci left thousands of pages filled with sketches and notes, studies of muscles, designs of flying machines, diagrams of water flow, lists of groceries. What stands out is not just his talent, but his compulsive habit of recording everything. It was not inspiration alone that produced masterpieces. It was the daily discipline of capturing fragments of thought, no matter how trivial. Over time, these fragments became mosaics, and the mosaics became art and science centuries ahead of their time. Charles Darwin, too, reminds us that genius thrives on repetition. Before his theory of evolution reshaped human understanding, Darwin walked the same paths around his property almost every day. He called them his thinking paths. Step after step, he mulled over observations, refining his thoughts until they became the foundation of a theory that shook the world. It was not a single epiphany under a tree, but 1,000 walks, 1,000 reflections, 1,000 small habits strung together. Even in music, history's greats followed ordinary rituals. Ludwig van Beethoven had a habit of counting exactly 60 coffee beans for his morning brew. To others, it may seem obsessive or strange, but for him, it was a ritual of focus, a grounding start to the day. Afterward, he would sit and write, sometimes for hours, sketching fragments of melodies. The habit of showing up daily, regardless of inspiration, was the crucible in which timeless symphonies were forged. Look closer at Marie Curie, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. She did not stumble upon the discovery of radioactivity in a burst of brilliance. She and her husband Pierre stirred pitchblende rock ore day after day in a shed, inhaling dust and fumes, boiling down ton after ton of material until the faint glow of radium emerged. Her genius was not a single moment of glory, but the habit of persistence, of showing up to the lab daily despite exhaustion and doubt. The common thread across all these figures is not luck, nor even raw talent. It is ritual. It is repetition. It is small, often unremarkable actions stacked upon one another like bricks. And while history remembers the cathedral, the truth is it was built stone by stone. This should give you hope, because it means greatness is not locked away for a chosen few. It means you, too, can cultivate habits so small they seem meaningless, but over time they accumulate into something extraordinary. The question is not whether you are capable of genius. The question is whether you are willing to water the seeds daily. Imagine looking at your own life through the lens of history. Decades from now, if someone were to write about your achievements, what would they find? Would they trace your success back to a giant leap? Or would they see the quiet patterns of your days? The way you journaled each morning? The way you read 10 minutes each night? The way you took a walk to clear your mind? History might only see the fireworks, but the truth will always be the match. And so, as we leave this reflection on history's hidden routines, carry this realization. Genius is not a gift bestowed, but a craft cultivated. It is hidden in the notebooks, the morning rituals, the walks, the repetitions. Next, we will step deeper into one of the most vivid examples, Leonardo da Vinci himself, and explore how a single habit, carried faithfully, became the engine of one of the greatest minds in human history. Leonardo da Vinci is remembered as the very embodiment of the word genius. His paintings changed art forever. His notebooks contained designs centuries ahead of their time, and his curiosity spanned every discipline imaginable, from anatomy to hydraulics, from flight to fortifications. Yet if you trace his brilliance back to its root, you do not find a miraculous moment of insight. You find a simple habit, the daily act of keeping a notebook. Leonardo's notebooks were his living companions. He carried them everywhere, into the fields, to the workshops, even to markets and kitchens. Whenever he saw something curious, he sketched it. Whenever a question occurred, he wrote it down. His notebooks were not orderly. They were wild gardens of observation. One page might hold a study of bird wings, the next a design for a machine, the next a shopping list that included wine, bread, and fresh figs. To a casual reader, much of it looked chaotic, but in that chaos was a relentless pattern of attention. Why was this habit so powerful? Because it captured thoughts before they vanished. Ideas are slippery. They flash across the mind and then dissolve if not caught. Leonardo refused to let them escape. By jotting down even the smallest curiosity, he preserved seeds of possibility. Some of those seeds sprouted into inventions like flying machines and armored vehicles. Others lay dormant for centuries, only to be rediscovered and marveled at long after his death. But they all began as simple notes on scraps of paper. This notebook habit also reveals something essential about genius. It is not just about producing answers, but about multiplying questions. Leonardo's pages are filled with lines like, "Why is the sky blue? How does a bird stay aloft? How do the muscles of the face move when someone smiles?" These questions might seem childlike, but by writing them down, Leonardo kept his curiosity alive. He trained his mind to never stop wondering, never stop probing. Genius, then, is not the possession of knowledge, but the habit of asking. Think about this in your own life. How many thoughts pass through your mind each day, never captured, never remembered? How many sparks of curiosity have you lost because you assumed you would recall them later, only to watch them fade? Leonardo's greatness was not just that he had more ideas than others. It was that he honored his ideas enough to trap them on paper. There is a story of Leonardo sketching water ripples, watching how they spread in circles when a stone fell into a pond. To others, it was just water. To him, it was a mystery worth recording. Decades later, his observations helped shape principles of fluid dynamics. The habit of recording the ordinary revealed patterns invisible to the casual eye. That is the quiet force of micro-habits. They take what seems mundane and transform it into discovery. This is a lesson you can borrow immediately. You do not need to be Leonardo da Vinci to keep a notebook, a pocket journal, a phone app, a slip of paper. Whatever form it takes, the act is the same. Each time you pause to capture a thought, you affirm its value. Over weeks and months, you will have created a garden of your own mind. A place where ideas can be revisited, watered, and allowed to grow. Consider the alternative. A thought comes, you let it pass, and it dies. Over a year, that might mean hundreds, even thousands of potential insights lost forever. Leonardo did not allow that loss. His micro-habit of writing preserved the fragments, and fragments became masterpieces. This practice also nurtures patience. When you write down ideas without expecting them to bear fruit immediately, you teach yourself that genius is not a single harvest, but a slow accumulation. Leonardo rarely acted on his notes right away. Some sketches sat idle for years. Yet because they were preserved, they could be returned to, re-examined, and reimagined. A notebook is not a final product. It is a reservoir. Now, imagine if you started this habit today. Imagine opening a notebook 1 year from now and flipping through hundreds of questions, sketches, reflections, and fragments of thought. Would you see genius? Perhaps not yet. But you would see patterns. You would see a mind training itself to pay attention, to wonder, to preserve. That is the beginning of every cathedral of knowledge, a stack of bricks, one on top of another, placed with care. Leonardo's notebook habit is a reminder that the extraordinary is built from the ordinary. It is a testimony that carrying a small book and a pencil can, over time, shape ideas that alter the course of human history. His notebooks are not relics of his genius. They are the very engine of it. And so, as we step from the ink-stained pages of Leonardo's world, let us follow the sound of another genius at work. This time not with pen and paper, but with music. Let us listen to Mozart and discover how his micro-habit of relentless practice transformed fragile talent into immortal sound. When we think of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, we imagine a prodigy whose fingers danced across the keys before most children could form sentences. The myth often painted is that of effortless brilliance, music pouring from him as naturally as breathing. But if you peel away the layers of legend, you find something much more human and far more instructive. The habit of relentless practice. Mozart's genius was not just inborn talent. It was disciplined repetition carried out with unwavering devotion. As a child, Mozart practiced under the strict guidance of his father, Leopold, who recognized his gift early and demanded structure. Hours upon hours were spent at the keyboard, repeating scales, drilling exercises, and playing pieces again and again until muscle memory was carved into his hands. To outside eyes, it may have looked oppressive, even excessive, yet beneath it lay a truth that would define Mozart's artistry. Every note of genius rested upon a foundation of thousands of repeated notes. Even after fame found him, Mozart's routine remained steady. He would rise, practice, compose, review, and practice again. He did not rely on inspiration to strike like lightning. Instead, he treated his music as a craft that demanded daily sharpening. The habit was not glamorous. Scales are not symphonies, and drills are not masterpieces. But the scales gave birth to symphonies, and the drills allowed masterpieces to flow without hesitation. What this reveals is the hidden role of micro-habits in skill development. Talent alone is fragile. Left untended, it withers. But when talent is nurtured by small, repeated actions, it transforms into mastery. Mozart was not merely a child of fortune. He was a craftsman who returned to the same keys every day, chiseling his gift into enduring art. Consider for a moment the power of daily rehearsal. If you practice a piece for 15 minutes a day, by year's end, you will have spent more than 90 hours refining it. If you write one page every morning, you will hold a book within a year. Repetition compounds, and what once seemed small becomes monumental. Mozart's life is proof of this compounding effect. There is a story told of Mozart composing a symphony in a matter of days, which stunned his contemporaries. What they did not see was the years of habits that prepared him for that speed. His mind and hands had been conditioned by relentless practice to respond almost automatically. What looked like a miracle was simply the flowering of roots grown deep over decades. You might ask, doesn't practice make life dull? Doesn't repeating the same thing rob it of vitality? Yet for Mozart, practice was not drudgery, but devotion. Each repetition was a prayer, a step toward perfection. Through the habit of practice, he found freedom. Because he had mastered the mechanics, he was free to create without limitation. Micro-habits gave him wings. This is a lesson worth carrying into any field. You may not be a composer, but you are a creator in some form. Of projects, of relationships, of your own life. The small drills you commit to, the rituals you repeat, are what give you mastery. Talent might open the door, but habits keep you inside the room. Let us also note the resilience built through this kind of discipline. Mozart faced struggles, financial instability, harsh critics, health challenges, but his daily practice anchored him. No matter the storm, he returned to the keys. That consistency was his sanctuary. A reminder that genius does not live in applause or recognition, but in the habit of showing up. So let us stand for a moment in that image. Mozart at the keyboard, candlelight flickering, fingers running scales he had played thousands of times before. To us, it might seem tedious. To him, it was the soil from which beauty would rise. And from music, we turn to science, to the footsteps of Charles Darwin, whose daily walks became the rhythm that shaped a theory rewriting humanity's place in the universe. For if Mozart shows us the genius of practice, Darwin shows us the genius of reflection. Charles Darwin is often remembered as the man who shattered the old view of life with his theory of evolution by natural selection. To many, his breakthrough appears sudden, like a lightning bolt that struck the world of science. But when we look closer at Darwin's days, we see no lightning, only steady footsteps, repeated over and over, along the same garden paths of his home in Kent. Those walks, quiet and almost invisible to history, were the heartbeat of his genius. Darwin called them his thinking paths. Each day, often at the same hour, he would stroll the gravel walkways around his property, head slightly bowed, mind turning over questions like pebbles in his pocket. He would observe the plants, the insects, the subtle changes in the seasons. These were not strenuous hikes or daring adventures. They were ordinary walks. And yet, in the rhythm of those footsteps, Darwin's theory slowly took shape. Why were these walks so powerful? Because they created a space for reflection. The body in motion frees the mind from stagnation. Thoughts that feel stuck at a desk often loosen when accompanied by the sway of arms and the crunch of gravel. The simple act of walking, small, repeatable, unremarkable, became a laboratory of thought. Each lap around the garden was another experiment in the theater of the mind. This habit also reveals a profound truth. Genius does not always demand intensity. Sometimes it demands consistency in the simplest acts. Darwin's genius did not arise from heroic bursts of energy, but from small, quiet rituals practiced faithfully. His micro-habit of daily walking gave him time, rhythm, and perspective. Like water dripping steadily on stone, the walks carved deep channels in his understanding until the theory of evolution emerged clear and undeniable. Modern science confirms what Darwin's life already showed. Walking stimulates creativity. Researchers have found that gentle physical movement increases blood flow to the brain, boosts problem solving, and enhances idea generation. It is no coincidence that many great thinkers, Nietzsche, Beethoven, Thoreau, and Darwin among them, turned walking into a daily ritual. What looks simple to the eye is profound in its effect. Picture Darwin in the 1840s, notebook in hand, pausing mid-walk to jot a thought, then continuing his circuit around the garden. To a passerby, nothing seemed extraordinary, just a man strolling. Yet those notes became the seeds of On the Origin of Species, a book that would alter humanity's understanding of itself. The world saw the explosion. The walks were the fuse. This is where the lesson meets you. You may not be writing a scientific treatise, but you have questions, problems, and dreams. What if you gave yourself a daily walk, not as exercise alone, but as a ritual of thought? 10 minutes, 20 minutes, each step a chance to untangle knots in your mind. You might discover that solutions arrive not with strain, but with rhythm. Darwin teaches us that reflection is as vital as action. Too often we rush through life, filling every gap with noise, phones, screens, chatter. But genius requires space. It requires silence, rhythm, and the habit of stepping away so the mind can weave unseen connections. The genius of Darwin was not just observation of the natural world. It was the micro-habit of giving himself time to let ideas breathe. As you imagine him walking, remember, The greatest revolutions can arise from the simplest repetitions. Genius hides in plain sight, in the humble act of putting one foot before the other, day after day. And as we leave Darwin's paths behind, let us turn to the deeper question. Why do small habits like walking, like writing a note, like practicing scales, prove more enduring than grand resolutions? The answer lies in the quiet resilience of the small. Why small beats big, and why micro habits endure when great leaps falter. Why do small habits last, while big changes often collapse under their own weight? The answer lies in the quiet resilience of the small. A massive resolution feels like a mountain. You may begin climbing with excitement, but exhaustion soon follows, and most turn back. A micro habit, on the other hand, feels like a pebble. You can carry it without effort, repeat it without fear, and because it does not demand heroism, it survives. And survival, over time, becomes transformation. Think of the countless New Year's resolutions declared each January. Promises of radical diets, daily marathons, or writing a book in weeks. By February, gyms are emptier, notebooks abandoned, and old routines reclaimed. The problem is not in the intention. It is in the scale. Big changes ignite sparks, but cannot sustain flame without immense energy. Small habits, though humble, smolder quietly, gathering strength with each repetition, until they burn steadily for years. The psychology behind this is simple. The human brain resists disruption. When you demand a drastic change, you trigger alarms. This is too much, the mind warns, and resistance rises. But when you introduce a habit so small it feels almost trivial, there is no alarm. Walk for 5 minutes, write one sentence, drink a glass of water. The mind accepts. Repetition takes root. Once rooted, the habit grows almost invisibly, and only later do you see its full strength. Consider James Clear's analogy. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Just as money grows with small deposits over time, change grows through small actions repeated. Big leaps promise quick returns, but often collapse in panic. Small steps guarantee slow returns, but compound into permanence. Genius, therefore, is not a sudden windfall. It is long-term investment in the smallest of choices. History has shown us this again and again. Edison's notebooks did not contain breakthroughs every day. Most entries were failures, rough sketches, dead ends. But because the habit of writing was small and sustainable, he persisted. Over time, one of those notes lit the world. Darwin's walks were not dramatic expeditions. They were daily strolls. Mozart's scales were not symphonies. They were exercises. Each genius chose the pebble over the mountain, and the pebble carried them farther. Let us bring this into daily life. Imagine two people who want to improve their health. One vows to run 10 miles a day. The other vows to walk for 5 minutes after lunch. The first burns brightly for a week, then fades. The second, with almost no effort, repeats their walk for months. Slowly, the walk stretches into 10 minutes, then 20, then a lifestyle. At the end of a year, the second person has built endurance, health, and consistency, while the first has only memories of failed ambition. The lesson is clear. Small beats big because small survives. The secret strength of small habits is identity. When you repeat a small action, you send a message to yourself. I am this kind of person. One push-up does not change your body, but it whispers, I am someone who exercises. One sentence does not make a book, but it affirms, I am a writer. Identity builds not from declarations, but from repetition, and repetition is easier when the action is small. This principle holds not just for growth, but for resilience. Life is unpredictable. Grand plans crumble under disruption, but small habits bend and adapt. Even in chaos, you can drink a glass of water, write a single line, or take a short walk. These micro-habits are anchors, tiny, unshakable rituals that remind you of who you are, no matter what storms arrive. So the question for you becomes, what pebble can you carry? What small action is light enough that you cannot fail, but meaningful enough that, in time, it will shape who you become? That is the genius of small habits. They bypass resistance, survive disruption, and reshape identity. And now, having seen why the small outlast the big, we move to the next step. What happens when one small habit triggers another, like a falling domino knocking over the next? This is the chain reaction effect, the moment when micro-habits, humble on their own, combine to transform entire lives. Picture a line of dominoes, each one small, each one almost laughably easy to topple. Push the first and the second falls, the second knocks the third, and so on, until the last one, perhaps many times larger than the first, crashes down. This is the chain reaction effect of micro-habits. One tiny action sets into motion a cascade that can reshape your entire life. You have already seen hints of this in the lives of geniuses. Leonardo's habit of keeping notebooks led him to ask better questions, which deepened his studies, which opened the door to discoveries in anatomy, engineering, and art. Darwin's daily walks not only cleared his mind, but inspired observations that fed into his writing, which in turn reshaped science itself. One habit is rarely isolated. Like ripples on water, it touches other areas, spreading further than you imagine. Consider this in practical terms. Suppose you decide to make your bed each morning. It takes less than 2 minutes, almost no effort. But that single act reinforces the identity of someone who values order. That identity nudges you to tidy your desk. A tidy desk makes it easier to focus on work. Focused work creates progress, which gives you confidence. And confidence spills into how you interact with others. One small habit triggered a chain, each link amplifying the next. Or think of health. A person decides to drink 1 glass of water before coffee. Soon, hydration improves energy. With more energy, they feel like walking after lunch. Walking increases mood, which reduces stress eating. Better eating improves sleep. Sleep enhances productivity, and productivity fuels ambition. The first domino was only water. The last domino is a transformed lifestyle. The beauty of chain reactions is that they require no massive force. The smallest push is enough to set things in motion. Once the system begins, momentum builds. This is why micro-habits are so potent. They rarely stop at themselves. They spread, silently influencing other choices until entire patterns of life have shifted. Think of your own experience. Perhaps you once tried journaling. At first, you wrote a single line each evening. Soon, that line became a paragraph. Then, journaling helped you notice emotions you had ignored. Awareness of emotions improved your conversations. Better conversations deepened relationships. What began as one sentence became an entire network of change. It is important to remember, however, that chain reactions can work in both directions. One negative habit can trigger a downward spiral. Checking your phone in bed may lead to less sleep, which leads to fatigue, which leads to poor decisions, which leads to regret. Just as a single healthy habit can ripple outward, a single harmful one can do the same. The dominoes fall either way. The power lies in where you choose to push. This is why intentional micro-habits matter so deeply. They are levers that shift the trajectory of your life. By choosing the first domino carefully, you influence everything that follows. It is not about changing your entire world at once. It is about planting one seed, tipping one domino, taking one step that makes the next easier and the next inevitable. The chain reaction effect teaches us to respect the smallest beginnings. Greatness is rarely achieved by tackling the biggest domino first. Instead, it begins by nudging the smallest one, trusting the motion will carry through. Every genius, every innovator, every artist who seemed unstoppable was, at their core, someone who chose one habit that set off an unstoppable sequence. As we close this section, hold this question close. What is your first domino? Which habit could you tip today that might cascade into new patterns of creativity, health, learning, or connection? The answer may surprise you in its simplicity. And speaking of creativity, let us step next into that fertile ground. We will see how the smallest routines, scribbles, warm-ups, rituals, become the sparks that ignite imagination and breakthroughs. Creativity is often described as a lightning strike, an unpredictable gift from the heavens. But the truth is far more grounded. Creativity, like genius itself, grows from soil tilled by daily habits. The great painters, writers, and inventors were not waiting idly for inspiration. They were building routines so small, so repeatable, that inspiration could not help but find them at work. Creativity is not magic. It is momentum. And momentum begins with micro-habits. Take writers as an example. Many imagine a novelist sitting at their desk, struck suddenly with a story so vivid it pours onto the page. In reality, most great novels are born from the micro-habit of showing up each day to write something, anything. Ernest Hemingway often wrote just a few hundred words a morning, sometimes less. Maya Angelou rented hotel rooms to write a few hours daily, even when the words came slowly. What made them creative was not divine luck, but the habit of beginning. Artists, too, rely on rituals that seem deceptively small. Pablo Picasso sketched constantly, filling scraps of paper with lines, doodles, and fragments. Not every sketch became a masterpiece. Most did not. But the act of drawing kept his imagination alive, always searching, always ready. Creativity was not a flash. It was a faucet, turned on daily, even when the flow was a trickle. Consider musicians. Johann Sebastian Bach, whose output of music still astonishes the world, did not compose through bursts of divine madness. He practiced scales, wrote exercises, and trained relentlessly. His creativity was fueled by the habit of craft. By repeating simple routines, he created a foundation sturdy enough to hold endless variations. His brilliance was not randomness, but repetition flowering into beauty. What these examples reveal is that micro-habits do two things for creativity. They lower the barrier to beginning, and they multiply opportunities for discovery. A single sketch may not matter, but 1,000 sketches ensure breakthroughs. A single line in a journal may not change much, but hundreds of lines begin to show patterns, characters, and ideas. Creativity emerges not from waiting, but from weaving small acts into a net that catches inspiration when it appears. Even in modern science and technology, creativity rests on small rituals. Steve Jobs famously walked barefoot during brainstorming sessions, a habit that helped him think more freely. Nikola Tesla fed pigeons daily, finding solace and reflection in the ritual, which in turn steadied his mind for inventive leaps. These micro-habits might look eccentric, but they were consistent anchors that created conditions for new ideas to surface. Now ask yourself, what small ritual opens the gate to your creativity? Is it writing a single sentence each morning, sketching a doodle in the margin of your notebook, playing 5 minutes of music, or snapping one photograph each day? The habit does not need to be large. It needs only to exist faithfully, repeated until it becomes a rhythm. Over time, those small acts add up to a creative identity. There is also another hidden power in creative microhabits. They silence the inner critic. A demand to write a masterpiece today will paralyze you. But a promise to jot one line feels safe. One line cannot be perfect or imperfect. It simply exists. And once it exists, it makes room for another. By lowering the stakes, microhabits allow creativity to flourish without fear. Think of your creativity as a garden. If you plant seeds daily, small sketches, notes, or melodies, you will not notice much in the beginning. But return a month later and sprouts are visible. Return a year later and the garden is alive with color. That is the gift of small routines. They transform empty soil into fertile ground, slowly, steadily, inevitably. So remember this: creativity is not a lightning strike. It is the daily spark of a match, struck again and again until it lights a flame. And from the flame, new worlds are born. Now let us carry this understanding from creativity into learning itself. If microhabits can build art and invention, how much more can they expand the human mind? The next step is to see how small acts of learning, repeated patiently, build extraordinary knowledge and wisdom. Learning is often pictured as a grand endeavor. Years of schooling, heavy textbooks, endless lectures. But in truth, the deepest knowledge is rarely built in towering leaps. It is built grain by grain through small acts of study, reflection, and practice repeated over time. Microhabits are the hidden architects of wisdom, and history's greatest learners prove it. Consider the philosopher Aristotle, whose writings form the bedrock of Western thought. He did not pour his knowledge onto parchment in a single season of brilliance. He cultivated the habit of daily inquiry, teaching, writing, and questioning. Every lecture, every note, every observation was a microhabit, and over decades they became volumes of philosophy that still shape the world. Look too at Benjamin Franklin. His genius in science, politics, and invention was not the result of occasional inspiration. Franklin designed a system of daily habits to cultivate learning and character. He set aside time each morning for reading and reflection, carried a notebook to track virtues, and dedicated small windows of his day to experiments and tinkering. None of these actions alone were monumental, but repeated daily, they made him one of history's most versatile minds. The science of learning supports this truth. Psychologists call it spaced repetition. Revisiting information in small, frequent intervals locks knowledge into long-term memory. Compare this to cramming, where hours of frantic study dissolve days later. A student who reviews notes for 10 minutes daily learns more deeply than one who studies for hours once a month. The habit is small, but the retention is vast. Think of languages. A person who learns one new word daily will, in 3 years, command over 1,000 words, a vocabulary large enough to read novels and hold conversations. Another person, waiting for inspiration to study in long bursts, may give up within weeks. The genius of learning is not speed, but consistency. Even Albert Einstein described himself not as particularly gifted, but as passionately curious. His curiosity took the form of daily questioning, problem-solving, and reflecting. His breakthroughs were not lightning strikes, but the fruit of small habits of learning, practiced relentlessly. His notebooks filled slowly, page by page, each equation and question another brick in the cathedral of relativity. Micro-habits of learning can take countless forms. Reading one page before bed, writing down a new insight each morning, listening to an educational podcast during a commute, reviewing yesterday's work for 5 minutes. These acts may seem too small to matter, but stacked day after day, They create a reservoir of knowledge that compounds like interest. The same principle applies to skill mastery. A musician who practices 15 minutes daily surpasses one who practices 3 hours once a week. A chess player who studies a puzzle each day develops sharper instincts than one who studies sporadically. It is not the intensity, but the rhythm that shapes mastery. The beauty of micro-learning habits is their adaptability. Life changes, schedules shift, but small actions remain possible. Even on the busiest day, you can read a paragraph, recall a fact, or write a line. The small habit protects progress from the chaos of life. It is a shield against stagnation. Pause here and reflect. What knowledge could you gain if you added a micro-habit of learning to your days? Could you learn a language, master a craft, or understand a field of study that now feels distant? The answer is yes, but only if you plant the seed daily. One drop of knowledge each day becomes an ocean across a lifetime. Learning, then, is not a grand performance. It is the quiet, repeated act of showing up. It is curiosity honored through routine. And just as habits build creativity, they also build intellect, wisdom, and understanding. From learning, we now move to another foundation of genius, the body itself. For without health and energy, even the sharpest mind and most brilliant creativity falter. In the next step, we will see how micro-habits of wellness, tiny acts of care, become the engine of lasting vitality and focus. Learning is often pictured as a grand endeavor, years of schooling, heavy textbooks, endless lectures. But in truth, the deepest knowledge is rarely built in towering leaps. It is built grain by grain, through small acts of study, reflection, and practice repeated over time. Micro-habits are the hidden architects of wisdom, and history's greatest learners prove it. Consider the philosopher Aristotle, whose writings formed the bedrock of Western thought. He did not pour his knowledge onto parchment in a single season of brilliance. He cultivated the habit of daily inquiry, teaching, writing, and questioning. Every lecture, every note, every observation was a micro-habit, and over decades they became volumes of philosophy that still shape the world. Look, too, at Benjamin Franklin. His genius in science, politics, and invention was not the result of occasional inspiration. Franklin designed a system of daily habits to cultivate learning and character. He set aside time each morning for reading and reflection, carried a notebook to track virtues, and dedicated small windows of his day to experiments and tinkering. None of these actions alone were monumental, but repeated daily, they made him one of history's most versatile minds. The science of learning supports this truth. Psychologists call it spaced repetition. Revisiting information in small, frequent intervals locks knowledge into long-term memory. Compare this to cramming, where hours of frantic study dissolve days later. A student who reviews notes for 10 minutes daily learns more deeply than one who studies for hours once a month. The habit is small, but the retention is vast. Think of languages. A person who learns one new word daily will, in 3 years, command over 1,000 words, a vocabulary large enough to read novels and hold conversations. Another person, waiting for inspiration to study in long bursts, may give up within weeks. The genius of learning is not speed, but consistency. Even Albert Einstein described himself not as particularly gifted, but as passionately curious. His curiosity took the form of daily questioning, problem-solving, and reflecting. His breakthroughs were not lightning strikes, but the fruit of small habits of learning, practiced relentlessly. His notebooks filled slowly, page by page, each equation and question another brick in the cathedral of relativity. Micro-habits of learning can take countless forms. Reading one page before bed, writing down a new insight each morning, listening to an educational podcast during a commute, reviewing yesterday's work for 5 minutes. These acts may seem too small to matter, but stacked day after day, they create a reservoir of knowledge that compounds like interest. The same principle applies to skill mastery. A musician who practices 15 minutes daily surpasses one who practices 3 hours once a week. A chess player who studies a puzzle each day develops sharper instincts than one who studies sporadically. It is not the intensity, but the rhythm that shapes mastery. The beauty of micro-learning habits is their adaptability. Life changes, schedules shift, but small actions remain possible. Even on the busiest day, you can read a paragraph, recall a fact, or write a line. The small habit protects progress from the chaos of life. It is a shield against stagnation. Pause here and reflect. What knowledge could you gain if you added a micro-habit of learning to your days? Could you learn a language, master a craft, or understand a field of study that now feels distant? The answer is yes, but only if you plant the seed daily. One drop of knowledge each day becomes an ocean across a lifetime. Learning, then, is not a grand performance. It is the quiet, repeated act of showing up. It is curiosity honored through routine. And just as habits build creativity, they also build intellect, wisdom, and understanding. From learning, we now move to another foundation of genius, the body itself. For without health and energy, even the sharpest mind and most brilliant creativity falter. In the next step, we will see how micro-habits of wellness, tiny acts of care, become the engine of lasting vitality and focus. At the heart of every life well lived are not only achievements, discoveries, or creations, but the relationships that gave those moments meaning. Even the most dazzling genius cannot thrive in isolation. What sustains us, what gives our efforts depth and resonance, are the bonds we weave with others. And just as in creativity, learning, and health, these bonds are not forged in grand gestures, but in the smallest daily habits, tiny acts of care, attention, and presence repeated until they become the rhythm of love and trust. Think of the simple act of greeting someone warmly. It takes seconds, yet when repeated every day, it builds a foundation of familiarity and affection. Consider the habit of listening fully, setting aside distractions for even a few minutes. That habit teaches others they matter, and over time, it deepens connection more than occasional grand declarations ever could. Relationships are sculpted by micro-habits: a smile, a kind word, a gentle touch, a note of gratitude. History, too, reminds us of this truth. Abraham Lincoln, burdened by the weight of a nation divided, was known for his habit of writing kind letters to grieving families, acknowledging their sacrifice. These notes did not change the war, but they wove trust and humanity in times of despair. Mother Teresa's genius of compassion was not one great act, but thousands of small ones, holding a hand, offering water, whispering comfort. Her daily habits of love became a legacy that still echoes across the world. The science of relationships supports this as well. Psychologists have found that marriages, for example, do not flourish because of dramatic vacations or rare romantic gestures, but because of small, consistent habits, saying thank you, sharing meals, showing affection, resolving conflicts gently. It is the accumulation of micro moments that determines whether a bond grows stronger or weaker over time. Pause for a moment and imagine your own relationships. What is the smallest habit you could introduce that might, over months and years, transform connection? A message each morning to a friend, a smile when entering a room, asking one genuine question each evening to your partner or child. These acts require almost nothing, yet they create ripples of belonging. Even in professional life, micro-habits shape trust. A leader who remembers to acknowledge effort daily inspires loyalty. A colleague who shares a kind word builds bridges. In classrooms, teachers who greet each student by name plant seeds of confidence. The genius of relationships is not charisma or dramatic gestures, but ordinary habits repeated until they become a culture of care. Let us not forget ourselves either. The relationship you have with yourself grows from micro habits of self-kindness, journaling a single line of gratitude, pausing to breathe when you fail, speaking gently to yourself in moments of doubt. These small acts accumulate into self-trust. Without them, even the strongest achievements feel hollow. And so we arrive at the full circle of our journey. Genius is not only about what you create or know, but about how you live with others. The smallest habits, listening, smiling, encouraging, are not trivial. They are the threads that weave the fabric of community and legacy. As we close this chapter, carry this truth. Every day, in ways you may not even notice, you are shaping your relationships. With each word, each gesture, each habit, you cast votes for the kind of bonds you want to build. Grand gestures may catch attention, but it is the quiet habits that create love, trust, and belonging that endure. And now, with all 12 steps complete, let us draw the threads together in a final reflection. One last reminder that genius is never sudden, never singular, but always seated in the smallest of habits. Closing reflection, 500 words. Genius is not born in thunderclaps. It is built in whispers. It is not a single event, but a pattern, a slow layering of habits, so small they are almost invisible. And yet over years, those habits form the architecture of greatness. We have walked through history's hidden routines, Leonardo's notebooks, Mozart's practice, Darwin's walks, Franklin's learning rituals, Mother Teresa's gestures of care. What unites them is not grandeur, but consistency. Each chose to repeat something small, faithfully, until it shaped their destiny. You, too, hold this power. You need not wait for inspiration, luck, or permission. You need only choose one micro-habit and begin. Write one line. Walk for 5 minutes. Drink one glass of water. Say one kind word. These seeds are enough. In their repetition, they will root deeply, and in time, they will bear fruit beyond imagination. Do not be deceived by the smallness of the beginning. A single brick builds a cathedral. A single note becomes a symphony. A single smile softens a heart. The world's greatest works are mosaics of countless small acts. When you embrace this, you free yourself from the burden of needing to do everything at once. You simply do something today and again tomorrow and again the day after. So here is the invitation. Start small. Choose the tiniest habit you can keep. Begin tonight or tomorrow morning. Do not wait for the perfect plan or the perfect time. Begin with what you can carry and let momentum do the rest. Because small does not mean weak, it means enduring. And enduring habits build enduring legacies. As you finish this audiobook, imagine yourself years from now looking back. What will you see? Perhaps not a sudden leap, but a series of steps. Steps that carried you steadily toward mastery, vitality, creativity, and love. That is the quiet truth of genius. It is simply the result of choosing again and again to honor the small. Never underestimate the power of a micro-habit, for it is these tiny rhythms, invisible to the eye, that write the story of your life. And perhaps, one day, when others marvel at your achievements, they will not see the hidden repetitions that made them possible. But you will know, and you will smile, because you will have lived the truth. Greatness grows from the smallest seeds. So begin. One note, One step, one word, one seed, that is all it takes to start.